And you hit on this in your book, right? You hit on essentially the closing of the what we call the Overton window, and the political discourse in America is starting to be limited, or not starting. It's like we're almost at the culmination of an effective 40, 50-year campaign to limit the discourse to being simply between two variations on a particular type of neoliberalism, and we've limited, like you said, the radical discourse, right? I heard your interview with Bill Moyers, and you were talking about we lost a certain richness in our ability as African Americans, and citizens to even have discourse around ideas that deviate from the status quo, and how race is used as a means to divide us to continue to protect the status quo. You mentioned James Baldwin. He actually talked about it too, about how if the poor white person, the secretary down at the Western Union, realized that she was in just as bad of an economic state in America, but because of her perception of black people, she felt, as at least I'm not black. And that division, that wedge that the status quo plays on, both from white Americans and black Americans, but it divides us right down to what you were saying when you were a boy, how in your neighborhood there were visible signs of the value gap. And here is a man who lives right next to you, who has in the same type of neighborhood, but still looks down at you as the nigga. Let's talk about class and race and the division there, and how we are kept divided to the benefit of the status quo. Unpack that for me a little.
Yeah, it's very hard for for us in the United States to begin to talk about race and political economy, to begin to think about, right, the ways in which race and class, right, intersect. There's the general kind of claim around crude leftists that they tend to think that everything is reducible to class, that it's the universal category, and then you have folk who want to explain everything by way of race, and we're rarely thinking out loud, at least in public discourse, in political discourse, right, or conversation, how race and class intersect. What we're witnessing, I think, today are the class contradictions within Black America in full view. We see a Black elite of middle class and upper class that has, in some ways, gained access to the corridors of power. We see some exceptions who are doing relatively well economically, and these become the faces of a system that continues to produce disposable people who are disproportionately Black and brown. Disposable people, that is to say, folks who work every day hard, blue collar workers who are working hard to make ends meet, as they have witnessed their wages flatline, as they've seen that their homes that they've worked so hard for aren't worth anything, as they've seen college tuition go through the roof, so they can't imagine a future better for their children because they can't afford the colleges that will allow them to ascend the ladder of success and the like. And what you have are Black faces, right, on the, fronting for this kind of neoliberal economic reality, and crying foul around kind of basic, well, I want to say basic, but crying foul with regards to recognizable incidents of racial injury. When at the same time you have Black workers, you have the Black poor and the Black working poor struggling mightily in an economy that is not only rigged against a certain segment of the society, but it's also doubly rigged because it's still rooted in the value gap, right? So race and class interact. I mean, there's a wonderful line that the late cultural theorist Stuart Hall out of England used to say. He says, race is the modality through which class is experienced in the United States, right? And it helps us think about the intersection, right, of the two. But then you have people, though, Brother Benjamin, who will invoke racial struggle, our struggle, right, who will invoke the Black freedom struggle as a way of concealing their class interests. You see what I mean? They want to hide behind our struggle for freedom, for racial. In fact, insofar as they're hiding behind that struggle, they themselves are protecting their class interests, which more often than not are not in the best interest of the black working poor and the black poor, right? So I'll give you an example really quickly. You would think that the major civil rights organizations and major civil rights leaders would be on the front lines for Fight for 15, right? Because black voters, black workers are disproportionately located in the service industry, and that a $15 minimum wage would disproportionately impact them. But if you haven't seen Reverend Sharpton, who I consider a friend, you haven't seen Reverend Sharpton or Reverend, others, right, on the front lines of the Fight for 15, because many of them are funded by Walmart and McDonald's.
Wow.
So see, I'm just trying to show you that when we start talking about, right, the value gap in racial habits, we have to understand how deeply intertwined that conversation is with the material conditions that inform and shape the lives of black and brown and poor people more generally in the country.